Greetings, Com 600. This is Ben Frazier. I hope you're having a good day. It's a beautiful day here in Virginia Beach. One of those days you dream for. But I'm here inside talking to you, and really appreciate the hard work you've done on the Smith book. I didn't want to talk a whole lot about postmodernism before you had a chance to really look at that book and wrestle with it. Some of you, and I've got this word, some of you have said, wow, that's a hard book. Yes, it is. It's a graduate course book. You need to be able to look at those difficult issues, philosophical and theoretical issues in our world, and be able to analyze them. And that's part of the work that we're doing here in this institution, in this class. So I don't make any apologies for assigning hard texts. But I do want you to, and these three men are very difficult. Postmodernism is a difficult philosophical school to understand, if it could be even called a school. And Derrida, Foucault, and Lyotard are three very challenging writers, to put it mildly. What I want to do today is just to take a little time to frame postmodernism so that their part of postmodern makes a little more sense. So in order to do this, we really need to go back and take a long look sort of at where we're headed. Postmodernism is something that comes after modernism. In fact, what postmodernism is really a critique of modernity. Now, that leads us to ask the question, what is modernity? And so here we want to wrestle with where modernity came from and how it happened, and what came before modernity, pre-modernity, or the Middle Ages. And what happened in the Middle Ages and before modernism was the sense that there was a divine presence of some sort in this world. For the West, most often that was identified as Christian, but maybe not, maybe other kinds of gods, those kinds of things. But there was a sense that the world was made up of other than just human factors and forces, that there were some supernatural or deity forces at work in the world. And what happened is that sometimes those forces were misunderstood, or sometimes those forces were, or those influences were wrongly identified. And so what happened is that modernity came along, and that happened at the Enlightenment. And what is the Enlightenment, or empiricism, which came also around that time, a little later? Empiricism says really the only things that we know are those things that we can touch, taste, smell, see, feel. That we live in a world where we have to experience these things directly. And out of that empiricism came then science, and science then forming hypothesis, testing the science to see, to create new knowledge. So in the Middle Ages, there was a sense of God and revelation, and that was fine, but it was limited. And then men came along and said, no, we can use reason, we can use rationale. And so modernism then grew up and privileged the understanding, not by revelation, but through reason. Now, reason is good. I'm very thankful for the scientific and medical and knowledge that we have in so many areas, and that there is this way we can create new knowledge and test new knowledge through the scientific understanding. However, if we think everything is knowable through science, there then is a major problem, particularly for those of us of faith, because we still believe, like the people in the Middle Ages, that there's such a thing as revelation. That doesn't mean we wipe out all modernity, but that means there are some questions, like, is there a God? What is the purpose of our life? Those are the kinds of things you really can't test through science or know through science. Those are the kinds of things that you really have to find out in a different kind of way. And so that's where the Christian faith comes in. So we still hold parts of revelation, and we still understand that we add to our faith, as Scripture says, reason. So there are reasons. We believe through faith. It is that commitment that we make. Now, so how does that get us to postmodernism? One of the things that has happened within the church is the critique of modernity. And so often we fail to realize that modernism is useful for many things, but not for all things. It's a way of knowing some things, but not for the major things of life in terms of why we are created, what role we have in life, is there life after death? Those are the kinds of things, spiritual things that cannot be seen, touched, tasted, or felt and known through the empirical or scientific knowledge and reason alone. Now, we're not alone in that critique. What is interesting about the postmodernist, and this is really where Smith is coming in, he has a similar critique. He says these gentlemen, Lyotard, Foucault, Derrida, have a similar critique as many Christians. Not that they are all bad, not that everything they say is wrong. There's some good things they have to say. Particularly their critique of modernity is very similar to the Christians' critique of modernity. That these people said, no, there are limits to human reason. There are limits to our rationale. Our rationale is fallen. Now, they wouldn't say that, but we would. But they would say, oh, no, it's limited. And so that's where postmodernism and Christianity find a touching stone. Now, along with postmodern's answer then, so their critique is very similar, but what they come up with is a different answer. And their answer then is insufficient for many of us as Christians. Or if it has some useful things, it needs to be tempered with not just reason, but revelation. And so there you see the pre-modern, the modern, and the postmodern. We're living in an age where all three of those things can be felt and experienced in our culture and in our time. Postmodernism is mostly experienced many, many times through technology and all the technological influences that are brought to bear on the individual and on the community in our culture. Let's look at the difference between modernism and postmodernism in just a little different way, if I can. Modernism, for instance, believes that there's absolute one truth. Postmodernism believes there are many truths. Modernism believes that we privilege intellect. Postmodernism would see us privileging will. Modernism privileges reason, while postmodernism privileges emotion. Modernism privileges moral absolutes, while postmodernism privileges relativism. And so you can begin to see, and there's several others of those that I could go on and on. Postmodernism privileges play, for instance, one thing, where modernism really does not privilege that same sort of thing, but more structure and hierarchy. So we see the differences between modernity and postmodernity. Are both of them useful to us? Sure they are. They both have some usefulness to us, but they also are both flawed. One of the problems in the church is that more recently, the church has forgotten the flaws of modernity and tried to use modernity to demonstrate and to support Christian beliefs over and above the postmodern. And what my suggestion is, and certainly what Jamie Smith is trying to say, is that we need to carefully look at both modernism and postmodernism, realize the strengths of each, but also realize the flaws of each. Realize that our culture is influenced by both of these more philosophical or ideological ideas that help shape who we are and who our culture is today. We still believe that God can reveal himself through faith, through all the many ways in which he does, most clearly in his Son, Jesus Christ. But those, and through Scripture and through nature and all those things, but also those things aren't in themselves perfect. That nature, you look at nature and you can see God, but you also see a lot of things that are very destructive in nature. Through Scripture, it's wonderful, but Scripture in itself is not an end in itself. It is merely to bring us to Jesus Christ. It's a means, not an ends. And so that's really what Jamie Smith is trying to say. Let's just don't write off all the postmoderns. Let's say, yeah, there's some usefulness in them. It's fun to play and not have everything just to be so neat and clean, and art should not be an end in itself, but we should use art for other kinds of processes and purposes and those kinds of things.